First of all, I just want to thank Deputy Connolly and the independent group for bringing forward this motion, which the Social Democrats fully support. I welcome the opportunity to discuss respite care. This motion goes to the heart of how the incredible role of carers is continually overlooked and undervalued by the government and the state. The inadequacy in the provision of respite care is a symptom of a much larger issue. Carers are absolutely essential and provide incredible support every day with disgracefully little state assistance in terms of payments and respite. Respite care is crucial for carers. It provides them with a much needed break from the psychological and physical toll of caregiving, while also benefiting the person who requires the care. We all know that carers have been paid a lot of lip service during the pandemic, but unfortunately this rhetoric has not been accompanied by substantive supports. Family Carers Ireland 2022 pre-budget submission was titled The Forgotten Frontline, and this perfectly sums up the situation for many family carers throughout the pandemic. They were providing essential care in the home. They dedicated all their waking hours to caring for loved ones, in many cases without any day or respite services. While Budget 2022 included some small increases in the weekly rates and long overdue changes to the means test, these measures were simply not enough to address the true cost of care. They are even less effective now against the backdrop of soaring energy and household bills. A recent report into the cost of caring from Family Carers Ireland found that the minimum essential standard of living cost for a two-parent household caring for an adolescent with a profound intellectual disability amounted to €752 per week, excluding household costs. This is €244 higher than the cost for a two-parent household with an adolescent child who does not have a disability. With inflation having risen to 8.2% by the end of last month, this gap has undoubtedly widened since the report was first published in February. In view of this increasing financial burden on carers, the absolute minimum this government could do is ensure that there is adequate access to respite services instead of the current postcode lottery. Even before the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, the provision of respite was disgracefully inadequate. The state has for too long undervalued the role of family carers and consequently underestimated the importance of respite. Some of this is due to the fact that family carers often suffer in silence. They get up every day and do this invaluable work with very little fuss. Why? Because they simply do not have the time to campaign for services, and they shouldn't have to. The state shouldn't need to be cajoled into providing basic services and supports. But when things reach a crisis point, they are forced to take to the streets. The recent Families Unite for Services and Support, or FUS, rally that I attended with Roisin Shorthall, co-leader of the Social Democrats, displayed parents' palpable despair. They have reached breaking point because the state is effectively ignoring and neglecting their children. These are children with disabilities and additional needs who are being left to languish on waiting lists. And their parents, who on top of their caring duties now must take to the streets, are undoubtedly fed up. One of their requests relates to respite and the issue of open access to personalised budgets. If the government were to address this particular issue, it would empower more people with disabilities and their families to make choices that work for them. This is about their rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. It's about receiving the necessary supports to live as full and independent a life as possible. But the government, along with its predecessors, has repeatedly failed to implement measures that would allow people with disabilities to exercise their rights as equal citizens. That is the very reason that it's still not ratified the optional protocol to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I continually raise the need to ratify the optional protocol, and the Disability Matters Committee has called for it too. Last week I attended the UN conference and state parties to the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities specifically to understand the role and importance of the optional protocol. In 2018, previous governments, some of whom are still at Cabinet, weren't shy about lauding themselves for being the last EU country to ratify the Convention, 11 years after it was agreed. But they failed to ratify the very protocol that gives this convention teeth. Why? because ratification of this protocol would leave the government exposed with nowhere to hide. It would shift the balance of power by giving citizens the ability to take cases against the state to the UN. This is why they're dragging their heels, and it is utterly shameful and cynical a reason. Different ministers have cited reviews, legislation, and even the UN itself as reasons for the delay, but as far as I can see, the only legitimate reason for this government yet to being ratified this crucial protocol is that it doesn't want to be held account over its failures to provide an adequate level of disability services. After decades of failing to uphold the rights of people with disabilities, something needs to force their hands. This protocol could be that catalyst for change, not just in terms of respite care, but across every service needed to ensure the full realisation of the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all people living with disabilities. When will the Minister honour this government's commitment to ratify the protocol? When will the Minister reinstate the respite beds lost during the pandemic? And when will the Minister carry out an audit of respite services? These are legitimate questions, one which we shouldn't still have to ask. It's been 15 years since the convention was agreed. This farce must come to an end.